Hi everyone, today we're going to look at spheres and in particular the volume and the total surface area. Now the two formulas you're going to be given in an exam, one is for volume, one is for the total surface area. I think it's important to point out a sphere has one face if you like, it's just one complete curved surface. When you look at the formula, there's just four circles. That's what it's equivalent to, four circles stuck together. You can't imagine it, well I certainly can't imagine it. But that's what it is. You don't have to be able to prove these formulas, understand where they came from. That is pretty complex if I'm honest. And again with the volume, you'll notice that for most objects that have circles in, like cones for example, or spheres, it's always a third. A cone is 1/3, you're going to do that in the next video. But a sphere is 4/3, but you are given it. And you may have noticed this before, it got taken off the GCSE years ago. But volume always has any dimension times by, well, it's 3D basically. So in here we have the radius times by the radius times the radius. So we've got three dimensions being multiplied together. If you think of a cuboid, we have length times width times height. We have three dimensions multiplied. And when we have that, that is always a volume. And when we have two dimensions multiplied, we always get an area. So it's 2D, 3D. Volume is 3D, area is 2D. So all you really need to know for a sphere is the radius. Sometimes they may give you the diameter, that's okay, you can just half it, can't you, to get the radius, and that is all you need to plug into the formulas. So let's have a look at some questions. Right, so if we do the volume and the surface area at the same time, we shouldn't have too much of a problem. So I can see I've got the formula written out, but I'd encourage you to write it out every single time. And it's better to learn it than keep having to go back to page 2 in your exam. So volume is equal to 4/3 times pi times 8 cubed. So you can just type that straight into your calculator. I'm not a massive fan of using the fraction button purely because it takes a long time. So I actually type in as 4 times pi times 8 cubed. I press equals and then I divide it all by 3. So I've got, in terms of pi, 2048 pi over 3, or if I hit the SD button I get 2144, and I'm just going to round this to one decimal place, and these are both centimeters cubed. Okay, so let's have a look at the total surface area. Well, that's just equal to 4 pi r squared, so it's 4 times pi times the radius squared. You could have put 64 in there if you wanted to. I'm going to type that in, 4 times pi times 64. Anything I can do really to save a little bit of time. And I get 256 pi. So these are my favourite answers in terms of pi. They're an exact answer. As soon as you hit the SD, you've got a rounded answer. You've lost accuracy. But in the exam, if they say to 2dp, or let's do this one to 2dp, why not? You get 2.5. So I should have said here 1dp, otherwise it's wrong. And here 2dp. Centimetre squared for area, cubed for volume. Okay, so if you get those, that should be pretty easy, right? A formula you're given, you just pop a number in. So of course we like to make it harder. Let's have a look at this one. So the volume is 40 pi. Now it's always nice when they give it in terms of pi because you'll see that they'll cancel out. And this question lends itself to finding the radius. Let's go a little bit further. Let's see if we can find the total surface area of this. So I know what the formula is for volume. It's 4/3 pi r cubed, and they're telling me that this is also equal to 40 pi. So instead of finding the volume, I can rearrange. Now I could have changed this for an x. Let's do that because there's an x in the question. There we go. So how shall I unpick this and get x cubed on its own? Well, let's times by 3 to start off with. So I'm going to get 120 pi. The reason I can do that is, for example, let's imagine that was a half of this. I could times by 2, yeah? So I'm timesing by this denominator. This x is being cubed, then it's being times by pi, then it's being times by 4, and then it's basically being divided by 3. Okay? So if you're wondering why I can do that, it's for the same reason. I could write it like this. If that was a half, I think it would make a little bit more sense because the 4 wouldn't be there. So half of something you can just times by 2 to both sides. or if you're halving something, you divide it by 2. But because it's 4/3 rather than 1/3, it adds confusion for lots of people. Okay, so let's divide that by, well, you can see here the pi's will cancel, so I can cancel these off. If I divide by pi to both sides, it's just a number after all. And I would get 30. Okay, if I divide by 4. So what is the cube root of 30? I have no idea, so let's try and find that on my calculator. Oh, okay, it's above the square root button on mine. So cube root of 30, and I get a pretty rank number. Okay, so it's 3.107. I'm just going to put a few dots to acknowledge that goes a bit further. And so I don't lose any accuracy, I'm going to store that in my calculator as A. Okay, so whenever I want to use it in a minute, I'm going to use A. And what have we just found out? We've just found out the radius, which is this figure here. So let's find out the total surface area. We know that is 4 times pi times the radius, which is 3.107 blah 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 squared, which I'm just going to put an A in here. In fact, I didn't even need to do that. It's my calculator is going to remember it, so I could just press answer squared. So let's do that. So I'm going to just put answer squared times by 4 times by pi. And if you're wondering why I did it in that order, because it's multiplication, it doesn't matter, but because that's in my calculator, it makes sense to square it first, so I don't have to worry about using the A or losing accuracy. Times by pi times by 4, or times by 4 pi, whatever you want to do. Press equals, and I get 121.33 to 2 decimal places. Okay, so they could just ask you to find the radius, they could ask you to find the diameter. In that instance, we would have times this answer by 2, or even better, total surface area. They can't really ask you anything other than that. Let's look at another one. This is called a hemisphere. So well, I say we, who's watching this? If you're at my school, we live in England, in Hampshire, and that is the southern hemisphere. And then you've got countries like Australia and New Zealand, all the countries better at rugby than us, basically, and they live in the southern hemisphere, so it's half a sphere. Volume is easy, right? If you think about it, if you work out the volume of a whole one, there's going to be 4/3 times pi times radius cubed, but we're going to divide all of that by 2. You could, if you wanted to, times this by a half, and then it's just 2/3 pi r cubed. That may be easier, but I think it's safer to work out the whole hemisphere and then half it. Maybe, who knows? So let's just pop the numbers in. So 4/3 times pi times 6 cubed. I'm going to type that all into my calculator. So 4 divided by 3 equals times pi times 6 cubed. Oh, I've done 6 to the power 6, don't want to do that. And then divide that all by 2. Oh, I get a beautiful answer in terms of pi, so I'm going to leave it like that. Okay, so that is the volume of that hemisphere. Total surface area, that's a little bit more interesting, because if we half this, it's a nice number, so halving that, was some people that might be a step too far. It shouldn't be, but it is often. But halving this, you'll see it's 2 pi r squared. But if I can just attempt to make a sketch of that, there we go, it's not too bad. The 2 pi r squared is this curved surface area. But what we actually do when we half it, we get this extra circle as like a base that's going in. Okay, so this base here is going to appear now that wasn't there before. So actually, we've got a plus another pi r squared. So a hemisphere, so a total surface area of a hemisphere is equal to 3 pi r squared. So you could have just halved it, but remember, this is the bit that people always forget to add on that circle that's appearing. Okay, because total surface area is the area of every surface. If a new one appears, you've got to find it. So that's going to be 3 times pi times 6 squared. 3 times pi times 36 is what I'm going to type in. And that gives me 108 pi centimeter squared. Okay, so I've done both of those in terms of pi, that's the most exact answer. Some of them we've rounded to 1 or 2 dp. You've just got to really react to what they ask you in the question. Right, hope that all makes sense. Good luck and enjoy.